Hello, football fans. Welcome to the Scuffed Football Podcast. I guess technically this is week 19, but we're going to call it for the divisional round of the playoffs because that's all anybody's here for. We finished the regular season, so this podcast is going to look a little different than the past 18 weeks have. The basis of what we're going to do from here is basically just talk about the matchups and stuff that are coming in the playoffs, get our picks, what we're excited for, how games are looking as we get into it. I think it makes the most sense to go in chronological order. So the first game we're going to get this weekend is the Seahawks and the 49ers. Obviously, the Seahawks make the playoffs by winning their game, sneaking it out in OT. The Packers could have theoretically made the playoffs, but they did lose to the Lions on Sunday night. So Seahawks get their playoff spot. Divisional matchup. I think that had this happened mid-season, it would have been a super exciting playoff game, but I'm worried that this one's going to look a little more one-sided now.
Yeah. I mean, we just watched the Niners also put up, a really good game last week. It didn't mean much, but again, they were just playing just to, keep it up, I guess. I 100% agree. I think this one's going to be Niners all the way, and I don't think it's going to be a battle.
Yeah, the 49ers just have continued to look better and better and better each and every week this season. I didn't have a whole lot of confidence in them until like 4 or 5 weeks ago, and then it's like, oh shit, I guess they can beat anybody pretty well. Brock Purdy's been playing out of his mind. The offensive scheme has looked really good, even when the 49ers didn't really have to care in their game on Sunday. I'm happy that the Seahawks made it in, like the way Geno Smith had been playing all season long. Like, he deserves his playoff shot, but it's unfortunate that this is where they wind up instead of maybe a game against an easier opponent.
Yeah, unfortunate, but
I think that's really our only series that's gonna be like super not exciting. So I hate to breeze through that one so fast, but when the spread is 9.5 points, I mean, come on, I don't really care that much. They start to get interesting, I guess, later on Saturday afternoon with the Chargers and the Jags. This game fascinates the shit out of me because while the Chargers have been hot enough to win some games, like the Jags have been playing some of the best football in the league over the past 4 weeks. I don't think that the Jags are any Super Bowl contenders, but I don't think the Chargers are either. I think both of them have been playing well enough that you wouldn't really want to see either the second round if you're the Bengals or the Bills or the Chiefs. Like I think this is a super interesting game.
Well, I don't share in your confidence, actually. I think Bengals, Chiefs, Bills, I think they just absolutely run away with the game against either one of these two teams. Even though, we've seen the Jags play some really good ball, like I don't think they're the same level. Again, you just mentioned you don't see them as Super Bowl contenders. But I think, those other three teams are just going to like single-handedly just pick them apart. There's like a different weight class, and I don't think the Chargers or Jags are going to be at the tippity top just yet.
I just don't think it's a free game against either one of these teams. Like you when you get to like when we move to the NFC in a few minutes, right? Like I wouldn't want to play the Cowboys in the second round, but I also wouldn't want to face Tom Brady anywhere in the playoffs, right? So like even if you're a better team, you can worry about him a little bit, right? And I think I'm in the same boat for the Chargers and the Jags. Like you can't just ignore them and move on. They're not a free game. Even if you're more worried about the Chiefs or the Bills or the Bengals, like I think you still have to like play this game like you give a damn.
I mean, who knows? It depends. It's the playoffs. Anything can happen.
I'm super fascinated mostly by the line here. I think that the fact that they're making the Chargers the favorites on the road, the way Jacksonville ended their season, I think is super fascinating because the Chargers flew basically under the radar for most of this year. I don't know. I think that not a lot of teams have looked like super thoroughly into these teams. They've been playing hot enough to get themselves into the playoffs, but I don't think that like the Bills have been looking all season for like, oh shit, what if we get fucking Trevor Lawrence in the playoffs? Like I don't think any team's been looking at him, and I think like maybe that could create a struggle later on for one of these teams that is the different weight class.
Well, yes, I mean I agree. Again, when we first started the season, I think you and I can both say we did not expect the Jags to be here. I mean, they've played really well. They've gotten back. But again, I mean, like at the end of the day, they're still the Jags. Like I think that they're gonna choke here. I think they might win in this one game, but I think they're gonna choke, and I don't see them going any further than the division.
Even if you make the divisional round, like as a Jags fan, doesn't that have to feel pretty good?
Well, as a Chargers fan, you also would feel good about that. But again, I think like the Jags are the better team than the Chargers, I think, right now, because of like the hot streak the Jags are on. Like we talked about the Chargers being a really weak like team back when they were, 5-3 or, and I still think they are pretty weak. Like we haven't seen the explosiveness that we've been seeing from the Jags, I guess, comparative. But again, I still think they're not there.
Well,
the same way.
So I guess here's my follow-up question, right? If the Chargers win this game, and if you assume that the Bengals and the Bills both win their games, you're getting for a third time this season the Chargers and the Chiefs. Do you believe that Mahomes can confidently take out the same team for a third time in the same season? Because that's one of the hardest things to do in this sport is to beat the same team 3 times in a year. The Rams Super Bowl run last year was like they had to go through San Francisco. They lost the first 2 times, but it's so hard for San Francisco to take care of the Rams a third time in the same season. Like I think asking Patrick Mahomes in a playoff environment, hey, they've watched you play this game against them twice. They've probably got you figured out this season's offense. Like, can he do it a third time? Like I hesitate to believe that either one of these teams gets like passed over in the next round, that it's just an absolutely free game. I don't think either one is as good as the Chiefs, right? But football happens, and I don't think that if you go into it looking like, it's a free game, who gives a shit? Like you're gonna struggle.
I mean, agreed, yes, but the same argument could be also made for the exact same way. Like the Chiefs also would know like everything about the Chargers. So I think it would like be like a low scoring affair. But if there's any players, I think the 3 people, again, they're in the AFC. I think Joe Burrow could do it. I think Josh Allen could do it. And I think Patrick Mahomes could beat a team 3 times in the season. Wait, hold on. We're about to see that again with the Bills and Dolphins.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, it's not the same team without Tua, but that's the third matchup this season.
Right.
We're going to do the same thing with the Bengals and the Ravens. That's the why? What the hell is going on in this playoffs?
We got a lot of divisional games. I mean, the Seahawks, Niners, the potentially the Chargers and the Chiefs, the Dolphins, the Bills. Like, lots of divisional games. But I don't know. So before we move on to the Bills and the Dolphins, right? I just want to clarify who's your winner, who you got. You taking the Jags?
For this one, I will be taking the Jags.
Okay, I think I'm with the Chargers just because I can rely on them more. Like the Jags have just been so streaky this season that it's hard to put faith behind them. But it wouldn't surprise me to see either one win. I'm gonna take the Chargers. To move on to that Bills-Dolphins game, I think that the reason that third matchup is different is because of how violently different those games have been every single time they've played. So the first time was 140 degrees on the Bills sideline in September. You're not getting that again, right? Like that was a 3-point game because Josh Allen threw the ball 65 times in 100-degree weather in South Florida, and you're not getting that again. The second time, the Dolphins didn't have Tua, so they weren't playing to the fullest potential of their offense. Now, potentially with an injured Tyreek Hill, you're definitely not getting Tua because he hasn't cleared concussion protocol. I feel like you're not looking at the same team a third time. I think you're looking at a significantly weaker version of the shell of a team up against the Bills.
Look, I agree. I think the Dolphins right now are terrible. I don't think they should be in the playoffs without Tua, without Tyreek Hill. It's not exciting for me. It's just another team, I feel like. And so, yes, statistically, yes, we're going to beat them a third time. But again, I agree. It's not the same Dolphins team. It's not, this is the game that would have mattered. I would have loved to see Tua, Tyreek, everything. It would have been a great shootout. Again, it's not the same team. There's no excitement for me on this. I'm just looking into next week, honestly.
I I guess like my interest isn't so much like who's going to win the game, right? I don't know that the Bills cover 13 and a half just because it's a difficult spread to cover, especially in the playoffs. But like, I guess like the Dolphins did so much this year to invest in Tua, right? Obviously, he's been injured a lot, like, but I guess it's time to question like how much the investment in Tua pays off, or if you can put some other rookie quarterback in there and still fill the spot. Like, obviously, we saw where Bridgewater can't do it, or at least can't do it super successfully. I don't want to completely slander the man, but if they get lucky enough to draft like C.J. Stroud, right? Like, is Stroud good enough to fill the hole that Tua had, or is Tua genuinely something special who just gets injured all the time? Like, I feel like the importance of getting to the playoffs here against a potential Super Bowl favorite is learning what assets you have or what you would need to rebuild, whether that includes the quarterback or not. Like, I think how close the Dolphins are able to keep this, how well they're able to play against really strong competition, even missing two of their best offensive pieces. Like, I feel like you learned something. I think there's value there for the Dolphins to compete, to play it close, right? Even if you don't expect to win, like if they can keep this where the Bills have to kick a field goal to win the game at the end, like the Dolphins go, okay, our offense is really good. Our coach is really good. We don't necessarily need Tyreek. Maybe we can build up the defense. We don't necessarily need Tua. We can go draft another rookie to keep the payroll down. Like, I think you learn a lot.
Well, I mean, again, going back to Tua, I think he can be a star. Again, we've seen injuries before. We saw it when he first entered. And ever since he's entered the league, he's been injured at some point. There's always been some season-ending injury. Obviously we don't like to see that. But again, like that's what I've grown accustomed to. I'm always expecting like Tua to be hurt. So I don't think CJ, like let's just say for example you use CJ Stroud, right? I don't think CJ Stroud and Tua are in the same like weight class, right? Like I think CJ could probably do a little bit better than Bridgewater, but I don't expect him to be the Tua. I don't expect him to be slinging it and just playing loose and bombing 90-yard TD passes to Tyreek Hill right away. I mean, maybe one day, but I think the path is to stay with Tua. Again, I would be a little like I would be really hesitant. You guys had the chance to pick up Deshaun Watson a while back. You guys didn't, and like I think Deshaun is significantly better than Tua, but you guys stayed the course, and now you have an injured quarterback.
I guess the interesting part to me, right, is that like this reminds me a whole lot of the transition the Eagles made from Carson Wentz to Jalen Hurts, right? In that, like, Wentz looked really good for a year. Like, I'll still argue that he should have been MVP that season, despite how bad he is now. Like, but a lot of that was they had the deepest offensive line in football, right? So when Carson Wentz started to struggle because that offensive line got injured, receivers were getting injured, dropping passes, whatever, they put in Hurts, and Hurts added a new element to the game that, like, okay, he's mobile enough that our line isn't that bad. So now we know we have a place to work from, right? If what you're missing, right, is like Tua's health, are they an offensive line away? If they walk into that Bills game and get sacked 18 times as Bridgewater, right? Like, okay, yeah, maybe we should give the offensive line another revamp, right? Like, and then try again with Tua. But if it's, hey, we had Bridgewater and the offensive line held up and we just kind of sucked, right? Maybe we have to like look at new play calling. Maybe we have to look at a new run game. Maybe we are good enough with just an average quarterback and a really good system, right? Like the 49ers are doing with Brock Purdy, right? Like, I feel like how well you perform in this game or where you're seeing those struggles, even without Tua, gives them a direction for next year. Because if I'm not mistaken, this was the last year of Tua's contract. Like, at this point, you have to pay that guy again. And I think that's really difficult to commit to if you're not convinced that he is something special or miraculous without having answers for his 5 concussions this season. I think I think you need to take away a lot from this game to decide how you're going to move on in the offseason, like what you're going to do to really make up that difference between where you thought you'd be at the beginning of the season versus where you are now.
I mean, yeah, I agree. I still think Tua is probably your best choice, but who knows?
And draft position, I think, is going to affect that a lot too. Like, CJ Stroud is realistically going to be a top 5 pick. You're not going to get him now that you're in the playoffs and being the back half of the draft.
Yeah, true.
Anyway, that spread is 13.5 for the Bills. I think it's a fair line, but covering 13.5 is hard, so I always hate it.
Yeah, it is the playoffs. Like I do expect the Bills to win, but I don't know about 13 is just a little too big out of the money.
13's a lot. I think it'll be within 13.5, so I'll take the Dolphins and the points. But I mean, just to pick an outright winner, give me the Bills.
Yeah,
that brings us into Sunday afternoon. We have the Giants and the Vikings. For me personally, I think this is where we have the most parity, like where I'm sitting as either team can win this game. I think that if you take body of work as a whole, the Vikings are the better team. Just all season long as a whole, the Vikings are a better team. Playing at home obviously gives them an advantage because Minnesota's a crazy place to play. But we've watched the Vikings struggle against good teams all season long. Some of their notable losses were like getting absolutely blown out by Dallas, right? Not looking like they were competing early on in the season when they were playing their best football against the Eagles, right? I mean, they did lose a couple of games here and there that they really shouldn't have lost. But in the grand scheme of things, like the Vikings were only losing to teams that were close and competitive. Their loss to the Packers. Their loss to did they lose to the Giants earlier this season? Maybe. Regardless, like the teams that they lost to ended up being, if not in the playoffs, close to the playoffs. Some of those losses were super embarrassing, so I guess you don't know how well they play against good teams. But also, the Giants started really hot, and they're in the playoffs largely because they started 7-1. Their last 10 games have been 3-6-1. Like they haven't necessarily played themselves into a like we're going into the playoffs really strong kind of position. I still believe that their defense is strong. I believe that their offense can hold afloat how good their defense is. But I guess it largely depends to me what kind of Vikings team shows up and how well the Giants can play against them.
Yeah, I mean, again, you mentioned the Giants being 3-6-1. I'm not super confident in the Giants. I'm not really super confident in the Vikings either. I mean, I've seen them kind of slide. But, I mean, again, at the end of the day, it is still Minnesota. Vikings are still 8-1 at home. Like, it's a really tough place to win. I think that I would trust the Vikings more.
To me, it comes down to what kind of offense the Giants put together. I think the weeks that it's weird because it shouldn't correlate whatsoever, right? But the weeks where like the opponent's offense is doing really well, take that Cowboys Vikings game into account, right? Cowboys offense was working on all cylinders. Everything they had on offense was going for them. They put together a fantastic offensive performance. When the Dallas offense was doing really well, the Vikings offense did nothing. Justin Jefferson had like 2 or 3 catches for next to no yards. Like Cousins couldn't move the ball at all. Their run game was bad. Like their offense just couldn't work. And I know it doesn't necessarily relate because it's not offense versus offense. You do have to play their defense, but it seems to be that way in every time that they've lost. So for me, the strategy to the Giants would be score often, score early. If they can put themselves on the board early enough in this game that it's, close or they're ahead. I mean, it seems like their defense would be good enough to hold it. And the trends that we've seen from the Vikings all year long would be that if the Giants are scoring, the Vikings aren't. I have to trust the Vikings offense to be better than the Giants defense just because of the weapons they do have on offense. But the Vikings have had either like really, really great performances or really, really terrible performances. That I think that like if you're a gambler looking for your payday, I think your money is to put it in the Giants.
Who knows? Who knows?
This game is also super fascinating to me, largely because of what it means for playoff matchups moving forward in the NFC. I think that I think I can say pretty confidently that I would expect the Cowboys to win. We'll come up on that game in a little bit. But if the Cowboys win and the other division winners win, meaning San Francisco and Minnesota, the Eagles end up having to play Dallas in their first playoff game, which is a whole lot harder than getting the Giants. So you're right. But again, I think that you'd run into the same thing with the Eagles and the Giants that you would with Kansas City and the Chargers, where the Eagles would have to beat them a third time. This past week, the Eagles only won that game by 6 points, and they were playing against the Giants' second string Like, I don't. I think it's very difficult. Like, the Eagles are going to either have a very, very tough opponent, or they're going to have to win a game against the same team for a third time in the season when they struggled to do so literally just last week. Seeding here and like the implications of this game in particular being the 3-6 game is super difficult.
I mean, either way, we're going to see. I think the Eagles have played the Giants twice, haven't they?
Yeah.
Just once. So either way, we're going to have to see them play someone for the third time, no matter who wins, Cowboys or the Giants. I mean, again, it's another division game.
Right.
You know, we love that. But I mean, again, I'm hoping that for your sake, the bye week is enough to kind of focus, rest up, and then be ready to go and win that third straight game.
Yeah, I think that the matchups this is going to create is going to be super interesting. Weirdly enough, like, I think I trust the Giants against San Francisco more if, you know, Seattle manages to pull one out and the Eagles get Seattle by default. Like, if that puts the Giants or the Vikings up against San Francisco, like, I think that makes it a whole lot different than like worrying about who the Eagles get. Then you're worried about like who plays better against San Fran, right? And
yeah.
So I think this game is super fascinating as far as like the winner and what matchups they're going to create next round. I think my money is on the Vikings, but really this is another one that could go either way. I think this is going to be the closest game of the weekend.
Yeah, I agree. I think this one's going to be close.
The spread on that one is the Vikings -3 at home, just for those keeping track. The last Sunday game is the Ravens and the Bengals. This spread feels a little disrespectful with the Bengals -8.5. I think the Bengals are the better team, right? I think they have the best win streak in football at the moment, if you don't count the suspended game. But like obviously the Bengals are a really good football team. I think you have to consider them like favorites to at least make their conference championship. Like, difficult to say confidently that you could put them over the Bills or the Chiefs, but like, it wouldn't surprise you if they made another Super Bowl this year. I know the Ravens are on a downward slide a little bit, but like, that's another division game. Like, that's going to be super competitive. I think this is a very difficult game to pick, and I think this is going to be a hard fought, like, nose to the grindstone. Whoever's more physical wins this football game.
Yeah, so I mean, looking at the line, obviously, I think I haven't seen the Ravens obviously without Lamar for the past few weeks. We are getting Lamar back for the Ravens, so I think that kind of like does kind of change the game like significantly. Again, we talked about, you know, the difference between backup and then like the first string. I think Lamar is definitely a force to be reckoned with. I think, and we've seen the Ravens though, they choke almost every single season in the playoffs. I would love to see a different result, but the way the Bengals have been playing and the way I know the Ravens to be, I still fully expect the Bengals to win this one.
Yeah, like I said, I can pretty confidently pick the Bengals, but like you mentioned, I mean, the difference in quarterbacks, right? Like, the gap between Lamar Jackson and Tyler Huntley is a canyon. Like, they're so very different quarterbacks. Like, it's so difficult to deal with Lamar Jackson because he is so mobile and he has so many weapons. Like, the Bengals playing defense against Huntley last week is not going to be at all the same defense they have to play this week against Lamar Jackson. Like, I think it adds some parity, and I think it's going to be an interesting game. But I'll be interested to see how close the Ravens can keep it.
Yeah.
That brings us to our last one on Monday night, which is the weirdest thing to say for playoffs because I'm so used to them being just Saturday and Sunday, but expanding the playoffs is going to be great. I think the spread on this one's very strange. We got the Cowboys and the Bucks. Cowboys are 2.5 favorites on the road. It's weird, right? Because like, for the last 20 years, you could bet your life savings on Tom Brady to at least make it to a conference championship, and you would have won more times than you would have lost. They have a home game in the playoffs, despite the fact that they're 8-9, which is absolutely insane to me. But the Cowboys are a really good football team. So like, still being favorites to go on the road and beat Tom Brady has to feel like the most surreal thing in the world, to be favorites on the road against Tom Brady in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that the line is actually too small. Like I don't want to be no, that's not true. I do want to be disrespectful to Tom Brady. He's trash, like terrible. Like his team this season is just no. Obviously, it's not there. 8-9. The draft difference is just like I want to disrespect Tom Brady. Like I think that line should be heavily favored more towards Dallas. Again, I know it's a playoff game and I know they're not home, but the way they've been playing, I don't expect this one to be a fight at all. Yeah, I'm waiting to see Tom Brady just lay down again on the ground. Just
yeah. I think the Cowboys are significantly better than 2.5 points against the Bucs, right? Like, but if we've ever known any athlete in any sport to get it done in the playoffs, it's been Brady, right? Like, he has more Super Bowls than any franchise in the NFL, right? And there's a reason for that. Like, the dude wins, right?
Yeah.
I this one is very confidently for me going to be put your money on the Cowboys and be done with it, right? Like, but I think this comes down to the same thing that I had questions about with the Giants and the Vikings, right? Like, if you're the Cowboys and you're winning this game by 20 in the fourth quarter, you're pretty confident that you get to seal it up. Like, you don't get to look ahead. You don't get to know who your opponent is. I mean, I guess they do because it's Monday night, but like, you can't be the Eagles and be like, okay, we get the worst team left in the playoffs. You don't get to be, all right, we're the 7th seed, or we're going to be the only wild card team moving on. You can't do so confidently. You can't prepare for a couple of weeks out. You can't make a game plan until you've won this game, which I think gives them some really interesting scenarios for the next round. There's a possibility that they play the Niners. There's a possibility that they play the Eagles. There's the possibility that like somebody gets upset and you don't know who you get, right? I mean, if all of the wild card teams win, they could get the Giants again for a third time this season. Like you sitting in the fifth seed, you can't plan on anything. You can't even rationally make a guess as to who you might get, because one game going sideways means you got your opponent wrong and now you have to play somebody different. I just think that's interesting, and I think it's going to put the Cowboys in a weird spot for the second round.
Oh, wait. Listen, these playoffs are already weird, so
yeah, lots of weird games, lots of weird matchups, and lots of weird potential. So I'm pretty interested. We'll see how it goes. One more thing before we get into like officially making picks instead of just talking about the games. I promised during our last podcast that if we sorted out what was going to happen because of the suspended game, that we'd bring it up here. So what the NFL decided, not like 2 hours after we were done recording, was that if it comes down to seeding or an AFC championship game, because that could have potentially been decided by an outcome on the Bills and Bengals, that the AFC is now going to be hosted in a neutral site location. If I'm not mistaken, the only circumstance where that could play in now is if the Bills and the Chiefs end up playing for the AFC Championship. We're going to put it in a neutral site.
Now, if the Bengals also win out from here,
I thought that one be like when they announced it, that was true, but I think that one became null and void because the Chiefs are currently a game and a half better. So even if the Bengals won that game, they're still a game behind the Chiefs. Like even if they had won. Right. Like, I think they're far enough behind that the Chiefs would still be a better seed than the Bengals. The Chiefs will still get home. I think they had like revised it to say that the only circumstance where we'll get a neutral site game is Chiefs-Bills. My question is, for that circumstance, if you do get the Chiefs and the Bills, where's a fair place to play that on a neutral site that you still give a damn about it?
Yeah, I have no fucking idea.
My thought is that like I think that there are very few stadiums that are going to like be an impactful neutral site for that game to exist, right? You could go and play it in a warm location like Miami if Miami's out of the playoffs, right? Which you'd have to assume so, because if the Bills are in, the Dolphins can't be since they played this week. But aren't fans there going to be rooting against Buffalo because they're division rivals, right? You don't have to worry about weather, sure, but doesn't that just make it a Chiefs home away from home? You could go and play it like somewhere in an NFC team, but like how many of those teams that have the capacity to host that game like aren't still possibly in the playoffs that you can't plan around it, right? Like I think that where that neutral site is going to make a lot of difference for how that game plays out.
I mean, yeah, agreed. I think, the only other place I could really think of, though unfortunately I don't think it would be available because I expect the Niners to be in, would be like in San Fran, maybe SoFi Stadium. But those ones, have the capacity to. I mean, the Rams, they're not in, so we could use SoFi. But
I just think SoFi is like that's enough of a venue that like, what are the odds that there's not already something scheduled there? You know what I mean? Like, even if it be a concert or whatever. Like, I don't know. I think they're going to have to do some really interesting planning to find a place for this. And I think with a game of this magnitude, if it's an AFC Championship game against the Bills and Chiefs again, you're going to need a place with. If you're intentionally trying to make it neutral site, you can't just go and play like somewhere kind of close to one because it's convenient. Like, I think you genuinely have to put effort into making it neutral.
Go to the AFC South. Any stadium in the AFC South is good because no one gives a shit.
Yeah. I mean, like then you run into issues of like, can Lucas Oil hold it? Can Nissan Stadium hold it? Right? Like. I don't think the Titans Stadium is prepared to handle a game of that magnitude. And in the grand scheme of things, if you're in Tennessee, are you too close to Kansas City that like they still have home field versus Buffalo, right? Like, I think where you put this game is going to make a whole lot of difference, which is super weird that like, hey, we can suspend the game in neutral AFC. Like, I don't know if they've considered what kind of decision making is going to have to go into that to make that fair.
Oof, bring him to Gillette. Fuck it.
Yeah,
but I think that's too close to Buffalo.
It's too close to Buffalo, and how many people are you going to have from Foxborough rooting against Buffalo because they're in the same division? Like, I think you're in the same issue there as you are with Miami. I don't know.
Well, fuck it. We can use the Giants Stadium.
Yeah, I would love to tell you, like, hey, just use it in Philadelphia, but if it's like one game's on Saturday, one game's on Sunday, you can't host two championship games in the same stadium on that Sunday, right? Like, that doesn't... I think they're going to struggle with this one a little bit, depending on who's still left from the NFC. So that one will be an interesting one if it plays out.
I was just looking at the stat for Tampa Bay. I was looking at the point differential of all the teams,
Mm-hmm.
So we got the Philadelphia Eagles. They're plus 133. So you guys have scored 133 points better. Whatever, cool.
Yeah.
Cowboys plus 125. Even actually Detroit is plus 26, and the Vikings were minus 3. But looking at Tampa Bay compared to everyone else, and they're minus 45.
Yeah, that one checks out as a matter of fact.
They're the worst differential in their conference or their division, and they're still the division leader.
Like I said, Brady doesn't need to be good. He just needs to win games, and he finds a way. It's the craziest thing. Like, Noah was messaging me about like how the hell we had this whole conversation on Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening that was like, holy shit, the Texans just played their way out of a first overall pick, right? I was like, no, if you want to see something crazy, like go look at the final standings for the NFC South. The way that played out, right, is the Bucks get in at 8-9. Every other team, all three other teams ended at 7-10. So Brady was literally just one game better than all of his opponents to get himself into the playoffs and get a home game. And it's the most infuriating shit in the world.
And they still lost.
Yeah. Yeah, they lost to bring themselves down, which made every other team in that division 7-10, and they're getting into the playoffs with a home game at 8-9. It's asinine. I hate it. But Brady always finds a way, dude. You can't ever gamble against him, and I hate him. All right, I think that brings us into gambling. Obviously, we talked about these a little, so this one's going to be pretty short. If you want our picks on the regular season, both of us ended on 11-5, which means we tied for the season at 126, 140, and 5. We were so close to being back to 500, but not quite at year's end. I think we'll just run through these games pretty quick, and then we can move on, prepare for games this weekend. Again, we'll go in order. I got the Seahawks and the Niners. Niners minus 9.5.
I go Niners. Brock Purdy's about to show out.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's hard to trust the Seahawks at this point. I'd love for that game to be closer, but 9.5 feels too close. Chargers, Jags. Chargers are 2.5 favorites on the road.
I gotta go I got to go Jags here. Listen, I trust their team right now a little bit more than I trust the Chargers.
Oh, look, they're hot, but it's hard for me to put faith that they'll stay hot when we've watched it for 4 weeks in a row. I'm going to take the Chargers.
All right.
Dolphins, Bills. Bills, 13.5 favorites. Yeah, I know. For me, I'm taking the Dolphins just because it's so big. I think that they're better than to be 14-point dogs. I don't think they'll win, but I don't think that they're bad enough to let 13.5 go over them.
I agree, but done it all season except for one time, and it's my Bills, so I got to double down. I go Bills here.
Fair enough. I'd be more surprised if you didn't take them there. I have the Giants and the Vikings. Vikings are 3-point favorites at home.
Oof.
This one's so tough. You could have told me this line was straight up even, and I probably would still struggle with it. I think I'm going to take the Giants +3, only because it's hard to say what Vikings team will show up. The Giants put together their second string, put together a good performance against the Eagles. Like, you have to think they're going in feeling all right.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I just think Justin Jefferson's about to become a star even more.
That one stresses me. Like, I don't think that I would put money on that game, period, just because it's so hard to know anything. But yeah, for the purpose of picking here, I'm taking the Giants. I have Ravens, Bengals. Bengals are 8.5 favorites at home. With Lamar playing, I think I'm going to take the Ravens on the points, but I don't know. This is a really good line. Like, it wouldn't surprise me either way. I just think that Lamar makes enough of a difference that they've got to cover.
Yeah, as much as it pains me, yeah, I agree with you on the Ravens bit. Oh, God. I fully expect the Bengals to win this game, but I think the Ravens are going to keep this
one. All right. Then I have last game is the Cowboys and the Bucks. Like I mentioned, Cowboys are 2.5 favorites on the road.
Cowboys.
I'm with you. As bad as it feels to root against or to gamble against Tom Brady, like Cowboys -2.5 feels like a lock.
Yeah.
All right. I know it's pretty short, but I'm sure once we've seen some playoff games, we'll have a lot more to talk about next week. So I think this wraps us up for this week, and we'll come back to you next week with some playoff recaps. See y'all there.